President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, His Excellency Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona. Of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley. Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez. Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, His Excellency Erwin Lareau. Visiting heads of state, all other esteemed guests, friends, family well-wishers, Mrs. Manning and family, and all other protocols observed. For each of us, someday it will come to an end. There will be no more sunrises, no minutes, hours, or days. All the things you collected, whether treasured or forgotten, will pass to someone else. Your wealth, fame, and temporal power will shrivel to irrelevance. It will not matter what you've owned or owed. Our grudges, resentments, frustrations, and jealousies will finally disappear. Your hopes, ambitions, plans, and to-do lists will expire. The wins and losses that once seemed so important will fade away. It wouldn't matter where you came from or what side of the tracks you lived at the end. It won't matter if you're beautiful or brilliant. Even your gender and skin color will be irrelevant. So what will matter? Measured. What will matter is not what you bought, but what you built. Not what you got, but what you gave. What will What will matter is every act of compassion, integrity, courage, or sacrifice that enrich, empowered, or encourage others to emulate your example. What will matter is not your competence, but your character. What will matter is not how many people you knew, but how many people will feel a lasting loss when you're gone. What will matter is not your memories, but the memories that will live in those who loved you. A life
We are here at the Trinity Cathedral, and there are some minor technical difficulties with the miking, and we will get those sorted out for you, our listeners and our viewers, in just a moment. The technical problems emanate at this Holy Trinity Cathedral, so as soon as those are sorted out, we will continue to hear from the first of the tributes by Minister Luke Quamina of the Opal Bible Standard Churches. He's back up, so let's go to Minister Quamina.
Stance, but of choice from the beautiful truth. Patrick Augustus Mervyn Manning chose to live a life that mattered. The honor to pay tribute to this man will go down as one of the most transformational leaders in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. This honor is not only humbling, but I felt undeserving when asked by Mrs. Manning. I froze in that moment, not wanting to say yes because of the fear of the appointment. But I didn't also want to say no because of the fear of disappointing you in this time of loss. My time with Mr. Manning is just but a short 4 years of divine connection. Only 4 years, however, it seemed that these last 4 years were blessed with the most potent, resolute thoughts, revelations, wisdom, counsel, and vision. The genesis of our relationship was on a regular Monday morning when Mr. Manning agreed to give me 20 minutes of listening time. I believe it was because of who he knew my father to be, the pastor of the First Church of the Open Bible, whom he had grown to respect, that he decided to give me a listening ear, something he perfected. I spent my full 20 minutes thanking him for all that he had done in serving the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And with his regular kingly pose and posture, he gave me the Manning nod of the head, only to express to me, testing, that he thought people really did not appreciate what he did. This was the beginning of a relationship consisting of mutual exchange and philosophical bartering of biblical revelation and governing wisdom. How could this man of such great stature have the humility to pick up the phone and ask for an explanation of a scripture or ask for prayer? I felt it was a setup of spiritual bonding, where two firestones were creating friction, igniting a fire for change that remains unquenched to this day. I see Mr. Manning as a pinnacle leader. In my hunger to study leadership, I sought to find local examples that I would just ask questions, because I quickly learned in my youth that asking for photographs or autographs was not as powerful as asking questions. These are just a few things that Mr. Manning really blessed my life with as a young minister. I noticed, despite the physical limitations he experienced after suffering the stroke, he maintained a positive mental attitude. Days before, I was allowed to pray for him in his bed as he laid, and he says, "Luke, you don't worry about me. I will live." I admired this man, his great strength, his strong faith, and a very fitting theme today on Christ the solid rock I stand. Mr. Manning gave me no doubt the solid rock that he stood. I looked at this man throughout my years growing up as a fellow prayers boy take up his cross for a life of service. It was Jesus who said, if you desire to be great, then that person must become a servant. I saw Mr. Manning demonstrate service to all. I admired that as a young person wanting to grow in leadership in this country, in my community, in my church. He did not talk it. He did not speak it. He walked it. The third thing I admired about Mr. Manning is that he never missed a good place to laugh. Oh, that characteristic laugh if you would be at his home. Even things that would toughen his mind, he put his head back and he gave us a good, healthy laugh. Even at times in his physical limitations, I would come to the house and he never stopped learning. On his laptop researching, adding to his library every day, buying new books and sharing new information. I also admired Mr. Manning because of his magnificent obsession with vision. I think if it's one thing we know in describing Mr. Manning is that he was a man dedicated to vision. I think he knew, just like you shared in Pleasantville, that he planted trees that he knew he Mr. Manning also demonstrated the type of patience when passing by a child. He will look at their face lit up, and he was never too busy to stop and give a cheerful word, lift their spirits, lift their hearts. When I observed them one day, I wrote down, Luke, if you are too busy to stop and greet a child, you are too busy. Mr. Manning definitely took to God in his faith. Many times he would have prepared questions for me as we sat down and we discussed the Bible. In his last years, he says, Luke, I have learned more about prayer in these last days than all my life put together. One of my favorites was to see Mr. Manning never lose the passion for the wife of his youth. I enjoyed seeing the interaction at the home. Even in the last 3 days when he laid there, Mrs. Manning had on her yellow garb, her mouth covered, and she was in a hospital wear, and he says, Hazel, you're looking good in that yellow, you know. I love that. I thought after all that life of service, he did not allow his service to humanity and the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago to leave him shriveled up. He showed balance where he loved his family and he loved his country. 2 more things I want to just share with you, my takeaways from Mr. Manning. I don't know how he did it, but in our private times, I never heard him use his words to be negative or pull down someone. As a young minister, I thought I was coming to him with the scripture and understanding all that I had done in my studies. But he was the living example. He showed me that he had control of his mouth. He would not make any negative comment, even though I know in his spirit sometimes he was displeased. I think it was Napoleon Hill that says, when you are able to maintain your own highest standards of integrity, regardless of what others may do, you are destined for greatness. Lastly, Mr. Manning, I realized, strategically planted the seed of legacy in the minds of those he saw great potential. I thought it very humbling on a Sunday evening when he would walk in to First Church of the Open Bible with a bright smile on his face for prayer, would always take some time to meet with some young person and plant seeds of thought in our minds about the future, tell us to continue studying, tell us to not be silent and to stand up and lead. Mr. Manning, I want to thank you for your life of legacy. I want you to know that this vision is for an appointed time. Though it tarried, we will wait for it, for in the day of its appointment, it will not disappoint. Carve your name on the hearts, not tombstones, for a legacy is etched into the minds of others and the stories they share about you. Thank you, Mr. Manning, for the life you lived.